just a few minutes ago. I mean, BPE put in place all of these processes that we're all supposed to follow, and they did a great job. And sometimes, though, even and we've heard and we talked about, who uses those documentations to train. This came up at the North American conference, and the answer was we don't use these documents to train anymore. It's probably our fault, but we don't, right? But if you want to have something that's executed the exact same way every time, once a process expert like BPE says, these are the processes we're going to follow, if you can program them in and have them be automated, they can follow the exact same way every single time, right? So you have a consistency application that is a kind of order of magnitude above what we do today. Compliance. So let's use the example that Arnaud was using. Sometimes, or maybe if we think about, we do spares and packaging reserves at the end of every month. Those of you on the business side, maybe you don't have to do that. But it basically is just running a J.D. Edwards report, right? We take the balance, we compare it to the general ledger. If it's up or down, we debit or credit the expense, and we debit or credit the balance sheet. It's not rocket science, right? But that process, we don't have any way to automate that today. Because we're taking J.D. Edwards, we're having to do something, compare two numbers, which a human has to do, and then we're going to take the result, we're going to book a journal entry. Right? When you think about robotic process automation, it takes all of that and just says on day 3, run the report, compare to the balance, the general ledger account, this account number. If it's up or down, book this journal entry. And then file the result in Blackline so that when Marie and her team show up, it's all documented exactly what happened and what day it happened. But nobody had to touch it. So today, if we were to do that, we'd have to run the report, we'd have to make sure the IPE is done correctly. That reconciliation process would have to get reviewed, spreadsheet controls, if there's any spreadsheets, all that kind of stuff, an approver, etc. And then somebody would have to do that task and put it into Blackline and file it. It's just that's a very simple example of how companies use RPA to become much more compliant. And then efficiency as well, which we'll get to in just a minute. I want to make a point here, is that sometimes in a process you'll have exceptions, right? You go, yeah, well, I have a 10-step process, but in step 4 it's going to kick out. And you're going to have to say yes or no, does something have to be done? And a human has to get involved. But RPA handles that fairly easily. It just says kick out, send an email to this person, based on their answer, kick it back into the process and finish. That's how RPA handles the judgment side and still allows you to be automated from a compliance standpoint. Cost piece. So, number of words up here, but here's the big idea is this. Anywhere between 30 to 45% of tasks that we perform are automatable. And I say we because it's not just the people who work with us and for us, right? A lot of the tasks, how many of you guys have ever got done with a task at your job and you go, man, I just spent time on this. I don't feel like I added any value at all. Now you have other tasks where you go, man, I added a ton of value to that process. There's a lot that I do. I'm like, I don't think I added value to the company. I did it because I had to do it. There's a whole lot of those tasks, and experts will tell us 30 to 45% of those tasks are automatable. Not the entire job, just the portion. And we'll get to the impact on the humans in just a second, right? So it allows you cost reduction, 30 to 65% cost reduction. And they have some various others. And we try to bring out quotes, as Arnaud said, from our friends at Deloitte. We have quotes from them. We have McKinsey. We have the Gartner Group. These are respected organizations that are in this space that tell us what's going on. So you can read some of the other stuff up there. I won't belabor it. So let's look at where are robots being used. So these are real-world examples, right? And just to give a couple of examples here, you have a large commercial bank who used robots to handle 1.5 million requests, and you can see down here, right, they would have had to have had 230 full-time equivalents, and obviously they needed a fraction of that by using robotic process automation, right? Another example down here is, right, a large U.S. service firm used a service desk where they handled service calls, 62,000 calls, and then, yeah, they got all the efficiency we talked about, but the main point I want to make here is this, is it says crucially in this example, the incumbent used to outsource this to a provider in India. And they no longer had to outsource. They just brought it in-house because it was so efficient. Right? So you get to the question on arbitrage, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. here's one quick slide, because we had a brief discussion when we did a roundtable yesterday. But we talked about labor arbitrage, where companies used to spend a lot of their time, right? You can still get pretty big advantage, 15 to 30% advantage on a labor arbitrage. But if you go to an automation arbitrage, you can get twice that. And that's why companies are pursuing it, for all those reasons that he does. He can use all the systems. He never has overtime. He never has to sleep, right? And we'll get to in a minute. The employees actually find that when you take out all the transactional work and they get to do the stuff that's fun, they like it better than the result. All right, so this is the Cabot processes that can be automated. Now, this was a small smattering. I went to Jerry and Jing and 3CPO here and said, hey, give me some processes that you think would be high on the opportunity list to be automated. And this is what they came up with. And the points I want to make here is that you see the number of hours per month that are actually engaged. And we're going to go through an example in just a minute. This last one here on transfer pricing calculations and entry, right? It takes us 80 hours a month to do that, right? The one above it on processing manufacturing work orders. And all the regions here, we all have teams that process manufacturing work orders because it's the way J.D. Edwards requires that we do it. It takes maybe 90 hours, maybe more, every month. And all you do is you run it, you look for the variances, you file it, you do the documentation over and over and over and over and over again. And it doesn't really add value other than the fact that we execute the step because we have to keep the manufacturing work order processing through the system. So let me set this one up because I'm going to ask 3CPO here to give us this example. But let's look at transfer pricing. We have an analyst that currently works with Klay Kramer, wherever he is, and Liz London on our team. Now Liz is going to retire in a few years, if not sooner, because she's let us know. This isn't a secret, right? She's been doing this a long time. So when she's going to retire, and this part of her job, transfer pricing, takes 50%. So we're thinking, well, do we backfill for her? Or what do we do? Do we hire a new analyst? And analysts are, they're fairly well compensated, right? Or is there a way that we can automate out a large chunk of that and consider, doing an alternative approach? So this is your chance to talk to us about presentation and transfer pricing.
Thank you, Mr. Guthrie. So do you see that spreadsheet floating all over the world? Why is it doing that? It's doing that because the reselling region, possibly China or Europe, they want to buy something from the manufacturing region, which is the United States. So how do they do that? They take information out of JDE, they put it into a spreadsheet, and they send it to North America. North America looks at it, and they say, oh, I found some errors. Cell B54 is not correct. So they send it back to the reselling region. Oh, dreadful. So, what happens then? The reselling region corrects the spreadsheet and sends it back to the manufacturing region. Horrible. Then the manufacturing region looks at it and says, okay, but it results in a negative margin, so let's send it to the business analyst. Another sending. The spreadsheet's going over and over. Finally, we get to the point where we can actually take the prices and put them into JDE. But we're not done. Then we have to do spreadsheet controls. Dreadful. We have to go in once a quarter and look at all the entities and all the spreadsheets, maybe 30 or 40, and we have to check the calculations and the formulas and the source data, and then we have to sign off on it in time. Or internal audit and our friend Marie will be talking to us. It's horrible. I love Marie, but it's horrible. So, if you hire me, I can give you an automated solution. While you are sleeping, or possibly working with the businesses on true value-added analysis. I will be taking care of transfer pricing for you. Next slide, please. Here I am. I was a bit younger then. But I will take all the information out of JDE. I will no longer put it into a spreadsheet. I will stand on spreadsheets. These are the old days. I represent the future. Why would we ever take information out of a system, put it into a spreadsheet, mix it up, and then put it back into the system? It's nonsense. So, I will do step 1. Step 2, I will calculate the transfer price. I will figure out the standard cost of the item, and I will determine if it's profitable. If it's not profitable, I'll automatically send an email to the business analyst, and they will approve or disapprove. And from there, I will send the information to data admin, and they will load the prices. Nothing will go on PD hold. The order will ship, and Kevin will move on. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Very good. So that gives you some idea of what kind of processes we think are automatable. And again, I want to make the point, we're not just talking about BSC centers, business service centers, right? We're talking about now analytical processes. We're talking about possibly some of the work, that great standard templates that you guys showed from the business side yesterday, right? If you're having to pull a lot of data and develop it to get that nice OBI template you designed, my question is why? Let a robot do it and put it in the system, because you've already defined exactly how it's supposed to look. It's just going to pull the data and show it for you, right? So it's not just business services centers. That is primarily where it's used today. Accounts payable is the #1 department that gets used. Accounting, data administration, all kinds of things. Okay, so who's using robots? Very quickly, and there's 2 sides to this. #1 is what companies. Deloitte says about 30% of companies today are already using robots, exactly like the processes we're talking about. I was recently at a conference down in Orlando, and they asked, it was the largest shared service conference at that point in the world that had ever occurred, a whole lot of people there. So they asked everybody to raise their hands who was already using robots, and it was about this number. About 1/3 of the people raised their hands and says, our companies are already using robots. Cabot, we're not bleeding edge, and I don't think that's correct based on our culture, right? We don't like to be the very end either. So hopefully we can be somewhere on the line. That's why Arnaud from Europe and us from North America, I'm sure the Asians can be considered as well, and South America, we think now's the time we should start thinking about it. That's what we're saying. So about 1/3 of the companies is already doing it. They do it for the same reason. Again, this is that Deloitte quote: more speed, less cost, higher accuracy, basically the 3 C's that we're talking about.
Ted, are you going to talk about cost?
I am, if you're going to ask about it. Yes?
Less cost, less for what? How much does it cost?
Okay, so I've talked to a number of companies. They always say the same thing. You know how software companies do. Eddie's caution, Doug's caution, Chris's caution, they're all valid. You don't want to jump anything. Whenever Eric talked about it, this from Deloitte the other day, right? He's like, this is, robotics is just one step in this digitization kind of journey. But in cost-wise, you basically hire a company that uses their library of programs. That's all it is. And it's usually in some program like C++ or something like that. And you hire them, so you have a robotics kind of generator that helps you do the program, and then you have an executor. You can do it for like $100,000 on the generator side and maybe $50,000 on the other side. So you start, what most companies do, and I don't want to take our notes going to talk about the how in just a minute. But most companies end up sorting the processes and then start picking off the largest beneficial ones to automate. And so you quickly get to the point where the cost that you're spending, say it's $150,000 a year, is overcome by the savings that you
It
get.
is an annual fee, is that how it works?
So much software now is on the cloud-based or rental-based. I wish that weren't true, but they're pretty much always doing it that way.
So that's not a per robot, per transaction kind of?
No, it's per a whole set of robots. Yes. Whole, yeah.
And from
Toolbox.
a cost point of view, it will make sense for processes that we have that are global processes, where if we have a robot that is only used in North